Section 39 of the Soul, or Rational Psychology. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Soul, or Rational Psychology, by Emanuel Swedenborg. Translated by Frank Sewall, 1837 to 1915, and others. Section 39. Chapter 23. The influx of the rational mind into the animus, and by means of the animus into the body, and the influx of the animus into the rational mind. 470. That the animus flows into the rational mind is clearly seen from experience. For our rational mind is possessed wholly as it were by affections of the animus, since we desire what the animus desires, and rush as it were blindly or without any understanding into its concupiscences. The cause appears evidently a priori, since the internal intellectories are what taken together constitute the animus, to whose internal form and external form must correspond. The external form is the brain or the common sensory, as, accordingly, the affection of the animus is, such is the state of the sensory, for the state of the sensory puts on that form which agrees with the affections of the mind. So long as this form remains, no thing else, however grateful or harmonious, can be insinuated into the mind unless it agree with this state. The universal state includes and contains all special and individual states. The universal being formed, all the special states flow into it as harmonious. The intellectories are what form the change of state agreeably to the loves of the animus. Thus the animus flows into the state of the mind. The common animus is the agreement of all the intellectories according to that influx from the senses and from the blood. These form and move the common and external form to which the internal form corresponds. 471. When, therefore, the rational mind with the consent of the intellect remains in the state of the animus, which is that of all the intellectories, then it is blindly occupied by these flowing in. But when it dispels these and rejects the affections of the animus, or holds them in check, then it is enabled to put on more perfect states. These changes may be brought upon the more rational mind through sicknesses, and in that case by influx and by correspondence. By influx it may be, because diseases and diverse external accidents may so change the sensory that it can put on these states rather than those, but they are still states of the intellect. By correspondence, because the mind observes in misfortunes and sicknesses that the peculiar passions of the animus, such as vengeance, anger, envy, hatred, destroy the mind, and so it is imbued with piety and the virtues. Thus the mind itself by its own liberty changes the animus according to the occasion by reflection and correspondence, and puts on a state agreeing with more perfect loves, and so can the animus or its internal form be changed. 472. But to change the animus is to change the nature itself, as to change a good animus to a bad one, which is easily done, or a bad to a good one, which is more difficult. This can only be done by means of the rational mind and its understanding, let that understanding be either really its own, or one induced by faith or by authority. Nor is the nature changed even then, unless we shun and abhor evils, and never bring our mind into that evil state, and unless, as often as it falls into it, we snatch it forth with the liberty given us, and put on that state which agrees with a more perfect love. Nor does this avail, indeed, unless we remain a long time in this state, and exert force and violence upon the other, and by frequent works and exercises of virtue put on the opposite. and so continue until the mind shall have drawn to itself a new nature, and expelled as it were the old, so that as often as the old returns, we are aware that it must be resisted. Thus, and not otherwise, can we put off the bad nature and put on the good, a most difficult attainment in this life without the divine grace and aid, but in the same degree an end worthy of the greater mind if we apply ourselves. And what does not appear to be whole in us, we shall thrice best obtain by prayers to God. So nature, as it were, bends and changes nature, not indeed by influx into the intellectories or substances of the mind, but by correspondence and reflection. For the intellectory knows truths, or what is true and what is false, and as it expels the hatred of truth, then the love of truth succeeds in its place. Section 39.